Page 1. The Black Death of 1348 and 1349, by Francis Aidan Gasquet, 1908. Abbot President of the English Benedictines. 2nd edition. Preface to the 2nd edition. This essay, published in 1893, has long been out of print, and second-hand copies are difficult to procure, as they very rarely find their way into booksellers' catalogues. For this reason, it has been thought well to reprint this account of the greatest plague that has probably ever devastated the world in historic times. Although the subject is necessarily of a doleful and melancholy character, it is of importance in the world's history, both as the account of a universal catastrophe and in its far-reaching effects. Since the original publication of the Great Pestilence, additional interest in the subject of bubonic plague has been aroused by the alarming mortality recently caused by it in India, and by the threatened outbreaks in various parts of Europe, where, however, the watchful care of the sanitary authorities has so far enabled them to deal with the sporadic cases which have appeared during the past few years, and to prevent the spread of the terrible scourge. From the researches made in India and elsewhere into the nature and causes of the disease, many new facts have been established which assist us to understand the story of the great epidemic of the 14th century, now commonly known as the Black Death, which is related in some detail in these pages. The accounts of the ravages of the disease in India, which have appeared in the newspapers, are little less than appalling, and would probably have attracted more attention were it not for the fact that few Europeans have succumbed to a malady which has been so fatal to the natives of the country. The present bubonic plague in India assumed the nature of an epidemic in the Punjab in October, 1897, and, in spite of the drastic precautions of the sanitary authorities, it so far seems to baffle their endeavors to stamp it out, notwithstanding all the resources of modern science which they possess. In April, 1907, a telegram from Simla announced that the total number of deaths from plague in India during the week ending April 13 was 75,000, all but 5,000 of these having taken place in the United Provinces and the Punjab. At this time the total number of victims from the epidemic in the Punjab alone, during the 9 years it had existed, was estimated at about 1.5 million. So far as it can be traced, the origin of the Indian plague, as indeed that of the Great Pestilence of 1348 to 1349, is China, the great breeding ground of epidemics. It is supposed to have been imported from Hong Kong to Bombay, and the disease had already made great headway before investigation established the fact that the infection was conveyed by means of the ship's rats. From January to August, 1903, the estimated mortality in India from plague was 600,000, and in 1904 the total rose to the appalling figure of 938,000. Even this was exceeded in 1905, and it is stated that from 1897 to 1904 the plague claimed 3.25 million of victims. The campaign against the plague-carrying rats has been waged with comparatively little result, owing, in great measure, to the religious susceptibilities of the native peoples, and their aversion to leaving their insanitary homes, leading obviously to concealment of infection. Moreover, the rat is regarded by the natives as somewhat of a domestic animal. Its destruction is thus resented and its facilities for spreading the disease greatly increased. Curiously enough, it would appear that it has long been recognized by the native inhabitants of India that some connection did in fact exist between the rat and the bubonic plague. When the rats begin to fall, it is time for people to leave the houses, is an old and common saying in India, in which sentence was registered the popular belief that an outbreak of plague was preceded by a mortality among the rats. It is now certain that this connection does exist. The special commission appointed in 1905 to examine into this matter has established, by a series of experiments, that bubonic plague is due to the rat flea, called Pulex sciopus, which not only carries the plague germ from rat to rat, but is almost certainly the means by which it is communicated to man. It may be taken for granted, as an established fact, that malarial diseases are produced by the bites of the mosquito, and that sleeping sickness follows from that of a blood-sucking fly which transmits to man the bacilli of the disease. In the same way it is now known that the plague is passed on from the infected rat through the agency of rat fleas, which, when biting man, impregnate him with the bacillus of the deadly bubonic plague. It has even been suggested as by no means impossible that the plague may at any time be reintroduced into Europe by means of the rat parasite, and modern research has made it certain that want of cleanliness is a fertile cause of disease and its dissemination. In particular, it is proved that the fleas and bugs which exist in the poorer quarters of cities and villages may be the means of communication of many various forms of disease. As a suggestion to explain the rapid spread of the Great Pestilence of 1348 to 1349, these results of modern research are of interest and importance. The houses which sheltered the people in the 14th century were only too well calculated to assist the spread of the contagion, if it was carried, as now appears certain, by the agency of blood-sucking parasites. The account of French rural life at this period, given by M. Samé copyright on Luce, and reproduced in Chapter 3 of this volume, is probably true, in the main, in regard to our own country, and the insanitary state and habitual dirt in which our ancestors lived, would have provided an ideal field for the indefinite multiplication of fleas, and possibly of other plague-bearing insects. It remains to add that, with one or two minor corrections, and a few additions, the present volume is a reprint of the previous edition. Page 10.